He's been called a missionary to the unborn. Meet a man who spends his days saving lives. Welcome to another episode of Conversations. This is the show where we talk about whatever is on my mind. My guest today is Scott Hord, a former pastor who is about saving lives. So help me to welcome Scott Hord to Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Scott, welcome.
Good to be here, Dr. Swain.
So what got you into the business of saving lives? I know that you were a pastor for many years, so tell us a little bit about that transition.
Well, I've been a pastor for 10 years. About 6 years ago, I was struggling with anger, and there was a lot going on in our culture at the time. You had Ferguson, Missouri, and the riots that were going on, and I had a young African-American man come up and ask me a pretty tough question. He said, "What are you going to do as a pastor, as a Christian, with the topic of racism?" And I told him I was going to share the gospel and share Jesus with everybody I know. And he said, "It's not enough." And I was bothered by the statement. And I asked myself, what do you mean it's not enough? Is Jesus not enough? Is the gospel not enough? And he said, no, it's not enough. And so for 24 hours, I dealt with anger at him and the statement that he made. And the next day I took it to prayer. I was actually in a Starbucks in Smyrna where I live. And I was praying in the Starbucks. I said, Lord, I don't want to be angry at him. I don't want to be angry in general. And I said, I give you my anger. Would you give me something in return? And he gave me 2 words that day. And the 2 words were engage abortion.
Well, let me ask you this. The young man, he was a member of your congregation?
That's right.
And the congregation, what was the racial makeup?
Smyrna is a very diverse town, and I would say our church is pretty diverse, more than most churches. So I wouldn't guess at a percentage, but yeah, we have a pretty diverse church. So
for black people, calling a white person a racist or pointing out racism, that's done very frequently. Mm-hmm. So this young man, was he thinking about abortion, or why do you think he challenged you to do more, and did he have something specific in mind?
He didn't have anything specific in mind. I asked him, I said, do you expect me to get a sign, to go march, to protest? And he didn't know. And I don't think anybody really knew what to do. I don't think churches knew what to do. But what's interesting is the connection between abortion and racism. I didn't know it when the Lord told me to go engage abortion. I didn't see the connection at that time.
So did you know at that time the story of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood?
Not at all.
So at what point did you become aware of the history of Planned Parenthood?
Well, there's 2 locations in Nashville. There were 2 locations in Nashville that abort children, and I went down to one of them. It was called Hell's Hill, just off of Harding Place. There's 2 apartment complexes and the abortion facilities in the middle. As I began to go and stand down there and understand the dynamics of what was going on, I began to learn the history of Planned Parenthood and of who Margaret Sanger was and how she looked at people like yourself and said, you're an animal and you're unworthy to live.
And also immigrants.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, that is very interesting. And so the young man, did you re-engage him, and did he approve of how you had interpreted his statement? Because I think he probably was steeped in critical race theory, and he wanted you to become consciously anti-racist, which would start with you getting down on your knees, begging for forgiveness.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it turns out that I entered into this journey, began to rescue babies and children, and he was bothered by what I was doing, and it turned out he was on the other side. He's actually a proponent of Planned Parenthood, and so we parted ways at that point. But God used him to move me where He wanted me to be.
And how did that affect your congregation?
It's interesting because I didn't tell anybody at first when I went. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew that I needed to go down in love and humility and truth. I wasn't even really sure how to approach the women. And I didn't even know if I could rescue a child, but eventually I rescued a child. Austin J was one of my first children to rescue, and one turned into 10, then to 20, and I realized that I couldn't afford to meet all the promises that I was making the women, so I brought it back to my church, and the church was shocked. I didn't realize how many women have had abortions and that even sit in our congregations, and so families, some left during the service. They were shocked. And so it took them some time, but as these moms ended up in our church, and as the children were being born and running up and down our aisles, the church really got behind us.
Now, when you went down to the abortion clinics for the first time, were there other activists there, so you just joined other people who were already engaged in that ministry? Yeah,
there's been people engaged in this movement for a long time. I think it's been done wrong, pretty harshly and condemning. And so, there were some people down there, but not many. Many days I've stood alone. For a year, I've almost stood by myself. But there's always been a scatter of people that have been down there.
Now, did you encounter any threats from the people who were providing the, quote, services to the women?
No, not from the people providing the services. But, in our culture, Dr. Swain, there's a lot of rage, there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of thoughts on this topic. And so I get all kinds of threats. I tell people I'm the most flipped off man in America. I mean, people are constantly coming after me, but there's a lot of people that support me just as much. And so, yes, people pull guns. They try to tase us, mace us, run over us with their cars, all kinds of things. My life is threatened always.
Well, I certainly applaud what you're doing, and
Thank you.
We're going to take a break soon, and when we return, I want to talk more about the women themselves who have had abortions.
Yes.
We'll be back after this message from my sponsor.
Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain is made possible by Cooper Steel, a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Cooper Steel believes in sponsoring Carol Swain because we believe as she does, you build strong, you stand strong.
What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel is committed to excellence, responsibility, and community. Cooper Steel's motto is, build strong, stand strong. They treat their employees and customers like family. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Learn more about our generous sponsor at coopersteel.com.
Well, we're back with Scott Hord talking about abortion. And Scott, one of the things that I share with people is that I had an abortion early in my life, and it was around when abortion first became legal. I was married at the time, and in my early 20s, and I reasoned that if it was legal, that it must be okay.
Right.
And so after I had the abortion, I immediately felt guilt. I got pregnant again on purpose this time, and had a miscarriage and never had a live birth after that. And I kept it a secret for more than 20 years.
Wow.
And then in 2003, I'd moved to Nashville, and I was a new Christian. I had become born again in 1999. And Showtime approached me about a reality show running for president, and as part of that, they had a 100-question questionnaire, and one of the questions was, tell us a secret that you've never shared. Now, I realize now that they were getting information on people they thought would be important someday, stuff that they could use against them. And so I shared my abortion story. Then I called my two sons and told them. And then I called a person who was a religion professor at my alma mater, who was all pro-life, and I always wondered how he would react if he knew I'd had an abortion. So I shared it with him, and he immediately said, "You must go public. You must tell the world." And I said, "I'm not ready to do that." And then a few years later, the legislature here in Tennessee, they had a pro-life bill, informed consent, 3-day waiting periods, and clinic inspections. And I wrote an opinion piece in reaction to the dean of the law school at Vanderbilt, and I shared my abortion story.
Wow. Wow. Well, God will use your testimony, and it'll help other women out there. There's a lot of people who've had, what the statistic is 1 in 4, but I've heard it's even more than that.
I think so, and a lot of them are people in the church. And what bothers me is that I have women, that talk about being post-abortive, women in the church.
Yeah.
And I feel like, once you come to Christ and He forgives us for our, past, present, and future sins,
Right.
that you don't have to give yourself a clinical label.
That's right. That's good. What I see is every day I'm there Monday through Friday, and I see the women going in crying, and I see them coming out crying.
Right.
And I stand with the women who aborted 10 and 20 years ago, and a lot of them are still crying. Every time I speak, I've learned this, that when I'm done speaking, there's going to be a woman that's running to my table where I'm standing, and it's going to greet me in the back, and there's going to be a man. There's going to be a man, and they ask 2 questions. Does the pain end, and is there mercy for me?
And that's interesting that you mentioned men, because when I wrote my book, Be the People Called to Reclaim America's Faith and Promise, and I talked about abortion, there's a section on men as being the silent victims of abortion.
It's huge.
And I found that a lot of the men who are active in the pro-life movement are men that participated in an abortion decision when they were young, and that's their way of paying back, and they're still hurting.
That's right. And I see not only men come out and stand with me now, but women who have gone through a healing process, some kind of counseling or program. They come out and stand with me, and then they rescue a child. And what they experience is complete redemption in that moment. I have women that have now rescued 2, 3, 4 children that aborted 20 years ago, and the tears, the testimony, it's incredible. I see it happening all the time.
And I think, I've read some research that abortion in the church happens because, women feel like if they're having sex or if they plan for sex, that's not good, because the Bible condemns fornication. So when they do get pregnant, they don't want to deal with the shame that they feel like they're going to experience, and so they have the abortion. And what bothers me about abortion, lots of things bother me, but that women don't get informed consent. And so in my particular case, I have 2 sons. After that abortion, I never gave birth to a live child. I had a couple of miscarriages. And that's one of the complications that can come after an abortion. There are many others, but women are not told that. They're told that, it's safe and
simple.
There's all kinds of side effects that if you had informed consent, that women would know what they're getting into.
Yeah, that's right. And, we're designed to nurture, to love, to protect that child. We're not designed to poison that child. We're not designed to rip that child apart. And so when you go against the very image of God and you poison that child or you rip that child out of your womb, it's going to affect you not only physically and emotionally, it's going to affect you spiritually. That's why I see women coming out of Planned Parenthood devastated, crushed. That's why I deal with the women 10 years later that are still depressed and still battling suicidal tendencies because they weren't naturally designed for that.
But if you think about the messages that come from the pro-abortion side, I'm not going to call them pro-choice, pro-abortion side, those messages say that it's not a human life, it's just a cluster of cells.
Right.
And some would say that, that it's not a baby until it's outside the womb, even though we now know that that babies can survive birth. They can, at 20 weeks, they've had cases where babies were able to survive.
Yeah.
And the technology now, is such that they're able to survive at younger and earlier stages of gestation.
Yeah. I mean, science supports that it's a child. Embryologists, after every embryologist says it's a child. We have the science now that there's a flash of light at conception. We have DNA code that determines hair color, eye color, personality, right in that moment. But not only is it scientifically proved that it's a child, biblically, Psalm 139, fearfully and wonderfully made. Jeremiah 1 says that he has holy plans for that child, that he knew of that child in the womb while it was being created. I mean, there's so much 4D technology and ultrasounds. It's crazy what we can see happening in the womb. Just a few weeks ago, I saw a woman go in crying, 22 weeks pregnant.
Oh my goodness.
And have you ever seen a 22-week-old baby in the womb? We all were crying, knowing that she was going to go in. She didn't want to do it, but she still went through with it for some reason, and she killed that 22-week-old baby and child. We mourn that, but we see that every day, 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 babies every day, 412 DB Todd die.
Well, I know that there's some ministries where for those women as part of the healing process, they perform funerals and
That's right.
and burials of that child, or they do things in the memory. We're going to take a break. We'll be back after this message from our sponsors.
Dr. Carol Swain's Be the People, a call to reclaim America's faith and promise, newly released in paperback and audio with a new introduction, is a challenge to all Americans. If you are serious about being the best citizen you can be, this is the book for you. From addressing moral relativism to reclaiming the future, you'll understand why Dr. Swain is one of the most relevant voices in today's culture war. Are you ready to reclaim America's faith and promise? Purchase at bethepeoplenews.com/books or wherever books are sold.
The Biden administration's executive order on immigration brings to the forefront one of the most volatile issues of our time. In this timely second edition of Debating Immigration, I join my voice to that of other experts to provide you with facts and information that will help you understand what is at stake for our nation. This edition offers 21 original essays that cover race, religion, economics, human smuggling, and civil rights.
Purchase at bethepeoplenews.com/books or wherever books are sold.
We're dealing with a very difficult subject, abortion. Scott, what can you say to encourage women out there? What are some of the resources?
Well, when we look at the reasons for why women abort, the number one reason is, unfortunately, it's convenience. But there are women that go in and abort because they're in poverty-stricken situations. And so I have an organization called Operation Saving Life that I formed. And what we do is we meet the needs of these moms. And a lot of times they're alone and they don't have resources. And so when they choose life, we walk with them for however long they will let us walk with them. So one of my first rescues we've been walking with for 5.5 years now, almost 6 years. We pay rent. We've bought probably 7 cars to help moms get to work so they can provide for their kids. We put food on tables. We pay electric bills, you name it. We put them in school to get them educated. If they're addicted, then we get them in programs. If they need to be removed from environments, we do that. I mean, a young lady that went into abort was in a hotel on Interstate 24. She kept saying, "I'm alone." I was like, "No, you're not. We're with you." And I had to remind her time and time again. We got her out of that hotel, got her into an apartment, got her a vehicle, got her a job, provided clothing, food for her family. She's doing phenomenal today.
Well, how long do you work with an individual person?
There's no time frame, and there's no money amount. We don't say $2,000 to this person or $3,000 to this person. We walk with them as long as we can. The scriptures tell us to make disciples. And discipleship is hard, it's dirty, and you can't put a time frame on that. And you can't put a dollar amount on that. So we walk with them as long as they'll let us walk with them.
Well, I can tell you, as you know, that one of the criticisms of conservatives is that they care about the baby in the womb, but they don't care about it once it's born. That's
Right.
what they've said. And so your ministry totally nullifies that accusation.
Right, yeah, we're labeled a lot of times even as being bigots or racist, which is crazy because of the 254 rescues, most of them are Hispanic or African American. Just this week, a lady from Honduras was pulling into Planned Parenthood with her brother. I didn't know it at the time, but she was suicidal. She was going to kill her child and then possibly kill herself. She couldn't pay her rent. She didn't have food to put on her table. She was in an abusive relationship with her husband. She had moved out into a very difficult place with her mom. 2 babies at home, couldn't pay her electric bill.
How old was she?
20, probably mid-20s, upper 20s.
And the brother, was he supportive while you were talking?
He was just kind of, most men are just kind of nonchalant when it comes to the issue, but they responded. And I was able to talk to them on the street, get them away from Planned Parenthood. That night, I was in her apartment over by, in South Nashville, and I paid her rent, we paid her electric bill, and we put food on her table, and she's going to be in church Sunday.
It must take a lot of resources to be able to do that.
It does, because we don't know today what we will face. We've had 5 rescues this week. We don't know what that lady's going through, that young lady, and we don't just bless her and the child that's in the womb, we bless their whole family. We bless the whole family. If there's a boyfriend, a husband, other children, we'll help them as well.
How many people are involved in your nonprofit?
Wow, that's it. When I stood on the street alone for a long time, but I would say today at Planned Parenthood, there's probably 5 to 15 people down there right now. Tomorrow there will be 40, and there's people coming from all over. And I train people on the street on how to see, hear, and respond, how to engage people. The church has stopped engaging. And we're called to be peacemakers. Peacemakers go into places where there's no peace and bring peace. And so that's what I do. And so we have quite a few people involved.
Now, the people who are on the street ministering with you, are they racially diverse or are they mostly Caucasian?
Yes, we had 3 Latino Christians with us yesterday. We don't have very many African Americans. I have a call out there for the African American community and pastors to come join us. It's amazing. We're seeing the best parts of the church there on DB Todd than in any building you can sit.
Do you think the reluctance of some black pastors to get involved, is that related to politics? Many of them are Democrats.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. Because if you stand where I stand, then all of a sudden, people naturally say, hey, this is a conservative, Republican, Trump supporter, whatever. And so, but it's beyond politics. This is a spiritual thing. This is a injustice that has to be dealt with.
And I've been told that you've rescued through your ministry over 200 babies?
All right, 254.
My goodness.
And we had one born this week. So.
And the oldest one, how old is the first rescue?
He's probably 5.5 right now. His name's Austin J. His mom is a beautiful mom. She walked in.
Are any of them named after you?
Now, I'm trying to get somebody to throw my name, at least give
Scott
my
is
middle
not
name.
a bad name.
Yeah, but nobody has taken that on yet.
Well, that is just an amazing, beautiful story.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We're seeing just tremendous things happen. It's an awful injustice and it's very dark, but we encounter some of the most beautiful things and encounter some of the most beautiful people. We see the goodness of God. We see miracles that take place all the time. It's just incredible.
Well, with the black pastors, who are not directly engaged, they're not going to stand with you. I wonder if they would support the ministry financially if that was the choice. And, writing a check might be a lot easier than standing beside you outside of a Planned Parenthood clinic.
Yeah, that's right. And it takes everybody. Not everybody has the flexibility to come where I am. And so there's people that own businesses that, they're called to use their resources to further the kingdom, and it's a great way to do it. And we do stuff beyond the front lines there. I throw more baby showers than any human being alive. And so I love doing baby showers and just walking with these women. So there's a lot of people all across our country that are walking with these women in their lives every day doing the hard part of discipleship.
And going back to the church, I have shared my story at pregnancy crisis centers as well as at some churches. And you're right that there are a lot of women that are the walking wounded, and they really, they come up, they share their stories. And I think that we could do more to minister to those women so that they don't feel shame. If they feel shame and they think they're going to be embarrassed in their congregation and rejected, I think that some of them, would choose the abortion rather than what they anticipate the response they anticipate from the fellow congregants.
Yeah, we have to get the message out that God's mercy knows no bounds. His grace knows no bounds. It's immeasurable, and His love knows no bounds. And so if there's a woman out there that's aborted, don't suppress that pain. Lift your hands up off that suppression and let God enter in. He will heal that pain, and His mercy is there for them, and His forgiveness is there for them, and He loves them. And there's no condemnation from me, or there's no condemnation from the church, and there's definitely no condemnation from God.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate your being on Conversations, and you're doing a great work.
Thank you.
I will certainly do what I can. I will definitely make a contribution, and I would encourage our viewers to do the same.
Thank you.
We'll be back after this message. Stick with us.
For those of you who would like to know what exactly our children are facing in their education system, this is a must-read book. It will equip you and prepare you to make decisions about your child's health, about your child's education. So I want to encourage every one of you to grab a copy of Dr. Swain's book and join with me and Carol on the front lines in this critical time to eradicate the liberal abduction of our children.
We've had a heavy conversation today, but it's important for us to talk about the topics that affect so many millions of Americans. And you may not be called to be a missionary to the unborn, but you can support the ministries of people like Scott Hord. And we're putting up his website. You can see it there. Go there and make a contribution. And remember that what we do matters. We can save lives, we can walk alongside people, and you never know who's hurting.